Thank you to the Disability and Rehabilitation Research Project on Customized Employment of Individuals with Disabilities for inviting me to talk to you about connecting discovery to job development. My name is Tricia Jones-Parkin, and I work for the Center for Persons with Disabilities at Utah State University. I'm the project director for the Utah School to Work project, where we're focusing on using customized employment practices for helping students with complex support needs become employed before they're leaving the school system. I'm really excited to talk to you about this today. I just wanted to start my presentation with this quote: "There is immense power when a group of people with similar interests get together to work toward the same goal." My presentation today and everything that I know is because a group of people with similar interests have got together and really shared everything they know. The brilliant folks at Griffin Hammis, job seekers, their families, educators, VR counselors, business owners, employment specialists, again, a whole group of people around the country that love and do this work every day and continue to share and build each other up and continue to improve the customized employment process. I think it is what is so beautiful about this work. I've been so impressed by just the collective process and how people really do support each other to just do the best work and really support people to be where they are at their best, both professionally and with job seekers. So with that, let's get started. I want to talk about completing discovery with intent, building vocational themes, and your list of 20. So using your vocational themes and building 3 lists of 20, we'll talk about that. Connecting the list of 20 to job development, what we're going to call working the 320s, the power of employment planning meetings, customized job development, what it is and what it is not, assuring best practices through the role of VR counselors. So I think it's important, as we're talking about connecting discovery to job development, to really kind of reframe and talk about how to be intentional with doing the discovery process. So when you do discovery with intent, you're going to answer the questions of: who is this person? What are their ideal conditions of employment? What vocational themes will drive the job development? And what are the businesses in the community where it makes sense to go to speak with people? So discovery begins with the individual. We're doing a home visit, we're interviewing others who know the person best. We're looking at familiar task-based activities at home and community places that are familiar based on interest. Then we start moving to the community as we're talking to others who know this person best. Again, everything is focused on task-based activities. We start doing those in unfamiliar places based on interest in what you're learning. You start doing informational interviews and talking to others who have similar interests. You mine who else they know and start talking to those people. We're going to talk more about informational interviews and how you're really using those later on in the job development piece. You want to always be sure, if your informational interview goes well, they don't all go well, to ask if you can come back, maybe get your hands dirty, dig in a little bit, learn more. Maybe that person, if there was a good connection, would be willing to be a mentor or ask questions later. Or do they know anybody else that you could talk to? Again, you're always just looking for advice in those informational interviews. So this really kind of just puts them together. You have the discovery process, which involves the home visit, those task-based activities, informational interviews. Of course, benefits planning is key, knowing what resources are available, how a person's benefits are going to be impacted by work or self-employment. And you're using all of that information to then develop and identify at least 3 vocational themes that are identified for a person. Instead of specific jobs, the themes are a broad array of potential work situations. Think of themes instead of job descriptions. Themes are overarching concepts that hold many ideas. For example, instead of a car mechanic as a job possibility, we identify themes such as transportation or fixing as something you observe about the person in a different setting. transportation and fixing allow for more variety of places to explore than, say, car mechanic. When we're building those vocational themes and building the 3 lists of 20, we're doing job search planning, right? We're using the information that we learn about the individual job seeker in discovery, and we're developing a plan towards meaningful employment, looking at a potential list of employers, looking at their benefits, and we're really starting to identify places where it makes sense to connect with others around employment. When we're working those 320s, we are working collaboratively with the team, the job seeker, potentially those employers, to look at how we can negotiate. You have to understand what those unmet business needs might be. You need to understand what the individual's interests, skills, conditions might be for success, and what their specific contributions are going to be. These are all things that you're wanting to look at, and there's kind of this bridge that exists. So we're going to start with building the 320s and what it takes to do that. So again, we talked about the informational interviews in stage 2 of the discovery process. So you're using that knowledge and advice that you're gathering from the informational interviews. You're mining the supply and customer chains of businesses where themes seem to make sense. You're using your connections and the connections of the job seeker and team members. You're using those employment planning meetings, and we're going to talk in depth about that. So here's an example. This is a slide designed by Carrie Griffin. I had a wonderful opportunity to spend many years working alongside Carrie in many of the demonstration projects that we did in Utah. And this was a slide for me that was a real aha moment where I really understood what it meant to mine the supply chains and how it was so much broader than just what businesses were on Main Street or what you could see. So here's an example of someone who has a theme of transportation and entertainment, and how you start with an interview at a Napa auto parts store and a radio station. So you can see that the Napa auto parts store, local machine shop, that's who goes to a Napa store potentially. So then you look at the machine shop and you look at their supply chain. And then you maybe start looking at the next steps and refine some of those skills. Here's what it could look like at the radio station. Who are their supply chain? And look at those lists. And then those lists start going down. So this is how you can really start identifying those lists of 20 and combining themes to create new jobs, design businesses that satisfy both the supply and customer chains, and possibly even potential matches emerging. So for me, this was this aha moment where I understood when he would say, and he's quoted to say, there are unlimited ways to make a living in the world, because I never had thought to put these things together. And these jobs do really exist. And I'm at least, I don't know, probably once or twice a month, I read something or learn about somebody who does something for a living that I didn't know existed. So I really appreciate Carrie Griffin's perspective about that and this complex graphic. So here's another one about job developing up the supply chain. So here's an example, and we see this a lot where somebody has a food or an agricultural theme, and we started a grocery store. Nothing wrong with that, right? There's food involved. But it's oftentimes you're opening boxes or you're bagging or you're chasing carts, versus if you really get up the supply chain, you're getting closer to where cheese is being made, or you're growing grain, or you're farming, or you're weaving, or you're milking goats. One of the training and technical assistance projects we had, there was actually a goat farm really close to where we were doing some training. And because he used the goat farm example a lot, one of the trainees went and did an informational interview at the goat farm. And so I've always kind of stuck with that. And I frequent that goat farm quite a bit for products. So anyway, I think this is also another really just great example of visually thinking about where the closer you get to where things are being made might be the better match for someone in terms of what their real interests are. We worked with a young man in our School to Work project who had a very strong vocational theme of exotic animal care. He also had a strong theme and interest in organization. He also had some really strong traits in, he was very personable and outgoing. He loved education, so he liked talking to people about exotic animals, specifically snakes and lizards and reptiles of that nature. He has several of those at home. So we could have easily just gone to Petco. He would have, probably fit in there. But what we did as a team is we really worked hard to identify places in the community where he would be able to really be around other people that had the same passion he did for exotic pets. And so we found a small local pet store that is involved in expos and education opportunities and does demonstrations at schools and a bunch of different things. So not only is he working in the pet store every day, but he's involved in these other kinds of opportunities, and he gets to do some education. He gets to care for the animals every day. One of the challenges we had was his family was really concerned about his ability to work independently because he had had some job experiences that weren't really a good match for him, and he needed a lot of support. And so we didn't really worry about that. We wanted to just kind of focus on getting him, the right fit. We partnered with WYOA Youth Services and created an internship with the small business and provided him the coaching that he needed, in addition to the training fees and the support that WYOA offered. And at the end of the internship, he was offered a position. And then shortly after that, the pandemic hit, and what happened with that. And so he was, his position was put on hold, like many people. And as businesses started opening up, he was one of the first people they called back. And because of the limitations around COVID and needing to have less people in the store, the job coach really was not able to come and support him. But because he had worked there and been successful, and the family knew the natural supports that existed, they felt a little more comfortable with him being at this location and at this business. They felt, how included and how much they really appreciated and what he brought to the business. And so they agreed, and he went back. And so now, several months later, or, as they've opened the business, he's working independently. His hours have increased, and he's doing really well. So not only is he working independently, he's doing something that he loves. And I don't know that some of those education opportunities have opened up, but the fact that he was one of the first people they called back, I think speaks a lot to the goodness of fit in terms of the job match, and really, matching those themes to a place in the community that made sense for him. And they found his community, other people that are really passionate about reptiles. And so that's just one example, not cheese or agriculture, but just really being able to take a theme and really do some good work with that. So the other part of that we talked about working in the 320s is looking at your networks. So thinking about who you know is really, really important. I think I said in the very opening slide that this is such a collective process. And so I think even as organizations, if you're a provider organization, having those team meetings where you get together and you maybe bring your list of 20 together with job seekers that you're working with. And I'll talk more about the individuals job networks teams, but your internal employment staff network. Do you have boards? Does your organization have board members that would be interested in having a more active role? Do you go to chambers of commerce or community groups? It really is a way, this process requires you to expand those networks and draw on building social capital, not only for you as an employment specialist, but for the job seekers that you're working with. I think it's also really important when you really know who a person is and what their strengths and contributions are, you are framing it from a sense of this person has something to offer you're not asking for charity or a favor. They can genuinely contribute to a business because you know who they are and what they can do. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I think it's also important to think about the supply chains within your organizations, not only bringing board members on to look at your networks, but thinking about your supply chains that might exist within, your provider organization or places that you shop or where you spend time or where you spend your money. So now I want to talk about the power of the employment planning team. So in our School to Work project, we have 9 teams that are centered around a school site. But again, it's all about job seekers. We're supporting students with complex support needs that are connected to developmental disability waiver services. But we're using and braiding resources between WIOA youth services, voc rehab, DD services, the education system. So what we have done is we have provided training about customized employment to every member of the team. We meet monthly, we identify job seekers, and the purpose behind that is so that people can take these elements and principles of customized employment and then apply that to their daily work and think about every student that they work with, and have higher expectations and think about ways that everybody can be employed or have individualized work experiences. Also, when we come together as a team, that they know what we're looking for, more customized, individualized positions, not things that just exist. And so what we were finding is that for students that had not had a lot of opportunities or experiences outside of the classroom, it could be a little bit challenging for the providers. And when they start working with the student, they weren't necessarily drawing on the team as much, and they were getting overwhelmed, and there was this sense of urgency, and students weren't always leaving with, paid employment. And so people weren't feeling like they were being successful, and they certainly weren't drawing on the strengths of the team. And so we came together and we started facilitating these planning meetings, and it really helped. So we worked with Ashley Lance from Griffin Hammis. She worked with our students with our School to Work project from the very beginning, and really kind of dug through how we structure these employment planning meetings. And we started a couple, and then we had some of the employment specialists do it, and we found they weren't really comfortable, so we provided a little more structure and provided more mentoring. So this is kind of what we came up with. So the purpose of the planning meetings are to reconvene the team, get on the same page, harness the power of teamwork and brainstorming, really harnessing that social capital, and then keeping or reigniting momentum. And when I say team, that can be anybody's team. It can, right, I'm speaking, this particular piece is around the person's school team, but it can be a family, it can be really anybody who's in that person's life. So these are some of the things that we were hearing. Discovery takes too long. I can't think of 60 places in my community. The team, the family, nobody's on the same page. I can't think of discovery activities. They're too hard. I don't know what to do. So again, all of these things are people were not coming together and working as a team. So we really wanted to also define what the employment planning meeting was and what it was not. Again, providing real structure, but also staying individualized. It's a way to gather the team, to be positive. We wanted to have outcomes that everybody's leaving with next steps and actionable items. We would also schedule a follow-up meeting, whether it was a month later or 6 weeks. We would often meet virtually. Sometimes it's hard for everybody to get together. This was even, before the pandemic. Again, structured, but customized. We didn't want this to be an annual meeting where it became about signing or checking boxes, not dull and boring, not an opportunity to point fingers or moan and groan or complain. It was very much about being positive, engaging, and moving forward. If there were things that needed to be addressed, we would do that, but then this meeting was not the place for that to be happening. The 5 W's of the employment planning meeting. So this is about the job candidate or the job seeker in their team. It's an opportunity to summarize what's happened to date and then plan the next steps and brainstorm. The reason is to collaborate and develop next steps. And when it's any time the team is stuck, So this can happen at the end of discovery. It can happen during job development. It really can happen anytime there's this feeling of being stuck or needing some engagement. You want to do it how? With excitement, an open mind, and a willingness to connect with people. So why and when? So like everybody else, we've experienced a lot of turnover in this field, whether it was educators or employment specialists or VR counselors, right? It's just a challenge. So sometimes we would have a transition of staff. So somebody might have started the discovery process and then now they're doing job development with somebody else. And so we needed some time to reconnect, and they needed to really understand who was involved in this person's life and the purpose. So that's really been something we've had to do regularly, is re-engage and help people get up to speed and not lose that momentum. So those employment planning meetings are a really key time to do that, an opportune time to do that. At the conclusion of discovery, but before job development, I think this is really important because, you know, if somebody is doing discovery and they're doing activities and a person is, you know, they're seeing very different things at the school or at home or with other people, and that's not being captured, this is a time to be able to talk about that and add those things in. Or if there's some other activities that somebody has done, you can capture that here. After a home visit or interviewing others, but somebody's not really sure about how to do some unfamiliar discovery activities. And again, there's a lull in job development. An example of that that I have is, we had this really great young man in our school to work project who had some real significant health issues. And so really didn't have a lot of experiences outside of the school and was in his last year of post-high. And we had a new employment specialist. She was very committed, very excited, but she was really unsure about what to do. And when she did the home visit and she spent time with him at the school, she just really wasn't sure what to do next. And she was feeling overwhelmed and seemed like she wasn't making a lot of progress. And when she finally said, I just don't know what to do, we brought the team together. And when we brought this team together, we had his support coordinator who had known him a long time, the residential home manager. He didn't have contact with his family, but this residential person had known him for a long time, this teacher who had known him for a long time, everybody in the room together, including this young man. And she learned so much about him that she didn't get in that home visit. And you could just see the difference in her face and her level of excitement about the possibility that she could see with this student. I think the most powerful piece or moment that I had in that meeting and facilitating that planning meeting was, you know, this is a young man who's, you know, pretty involved and doesn't have a lot of verbal language. And we found out that he goes to church every Sunday by himself. He loves putting on a suit and tie. He takes the paratransit, or he has a member of the ward, he's a member of the LDS church, and a member of the ward comes and gets him and takes him to church, and he's there for 3 or 4 hours. He has a calling. He's very close with the leaders of the church and members. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that he goes and does this independently. And so that was huge. And he was very proud for everybody to know that that was something that he did in his life. And so I think that would have not happened if we had not had that planning meeting. So we walked away from that planning meeting with concrete discovery activities, contacts for places to go to do these discovery activities with this young man, because people had places and people that they knew that he could go and do that she could go and do those with him. And we set up a meeting for 6 weeks later and followed up, and those things had been done. Somebody had gone to church, that I think the employment specialist had gone to church and made some of those contacts with him so that they could, you know, also interview those people that had that relationship with him at church. And the process has continued to evolve. He doesn't have a job yet, but we're making progress, but it's happening. So again, that's just a demonstration of the power of bringing people together and learning about somebody in a meaningful way. So this is kind of the how-to, and we really wanted to give those employment specialists or people as much structure to the meeting as we could. So doing introductions, not everybody always knows each other, the why we're there, the purpose of it, setting those ground rules that we talked about, summarizing, right? This is for the employment specialist or whoever is facilitating the meeting to really summarize the skills and tasks of the job seeker, their contributions and conditions of employment. So they really, this is where you're really making sure you've done good discovery with intent and connecting all of those dots, listing those positive attributes, right? I talked about the outgoing nature of the student, the reptiles and his love for educating others. That's a positive attribute. Bridging discovery to job development, sharing those the list of 20 that they have so far and their 3 themes. Kind of sharing that with the group can be vulnerable because you might be off, but it really is an opportunity to draw on that team and get input and refine that list. Work as a team to complete it or change it. Identify warm contacts within that list of 20. Maybe people know folks that you've listed on those businesses that are connected to those businesses or others that are like them. Developing a plan of action. Summarizing, so kind of summarizing it all up, making sure everybody has their assignments, and then adjourning, setting the next time that you're going to meet. So here's an example from Griffin Hammis. Again, that's who I spent most of my time working with in the customized employment work that I've done. Just kind of an example of a list of 20 for 3 themes of transportation, construction, and culinary. They should all be very different. You shouldn't have the same list, the same kinds of businesses. You shouldn't have 10 auto body shops or all construction companies, right? It should be an example of that mind supply chain that might be related to the themes. You might not contact all 60. You may never. But it's really important to connect and look at those and use those lists of 20 as you're doing job development. We have oftentimes seen that people do this activity. They list the jobs, make the list of 20 and they'll list out the businesses. And then there's never any connection or reference to it again. And that's challenging when you've taken the time to list the businesses, but then you don't actually work from those lists because you've already kind of done your job, your planning. But then you're kind of you're ignoring it and you're not using all of that work. So it's really important to connect the list of 20 to your job development. So here's kind of another graphic that talks about the path, right? Discovery, you're identifying skills and ability, conditions, vocational themes, pulling in those employment planning meetings. That employment planning meeting, right, can happen at various points along that path. Looking at those lists of 20 and then leading to customized job development. So now we're going to talk about what customized employment is and what it is not, and ways to kind of forego the traditional employment process. So traditional methods include big box retailers, applications and interviews. It's got a sales base to it. You're completing applications, you're asking if people are hiring, you're going to HR, you're looking at job descriptions. With customized methods, you're looking at artisanal small businesses, you're creating visual resumes that are demonstrating a person doing those tasks and things where they're at their best. Applications are done as just kind of the necessary process or formality. You're identifying an unmet need and using that as a way to negotiate a proposal. You're doing job analysis and negotiation. You're using themes instead of job descriptions. So those are some of the key differences in how you're looking at customized methods versus traditional methods. In my experience, I think a lot of times, as I've worked a lot of employment specialists, a lot of provider organizations, people have been doing this work for a while and they have really good backgrounds in traditional employment processes and they're really good job developers. But then they also have a lot of other responsibilities. And so they might do discovery, and then some time goes by and they start getting impatient, we go back to what we know or what we're comfortable with. And sometimes it's not always minding those supply chains or being creative. And so you might go back to some of those methods and practices that you know, or the relationships that you have that may not necessarily be as individualized to the person. So I think it's hard sometimes when the funding systems or the structures are not in place to support employment specialists to really do the customized work and be doing some of that collective teamwork that it takes to really stay true to the customized process. I think we just need to keep that in mind. So, you know, the process of discovery, it really is a unique form of you know, looking at somebody and who they are at their best in the community. It reveals vocational themes. And, you know, we talked about them not being job descriptions and those are overarching interests, right? That means transportation containing mechanic, auto painter, driver, designer, and connecting employers with job seekers that share those similar themes is a way to make a personal, professional connection, right? Like the example I used about the exotic pets. I don't know if you know, I have known several people that are very into exotic pets, and they have a whole community of people that are very into that. So when you find those folks, you know who they are, and they connect on very many, on a lot of different levels. And that can be true with people who are into chickens or all sorts of different things. And so helping people find those connections with others can often be a way into finding employment and customizing positions. When we combine those themes, it strengthens, it really strengthens the process. It strengthens the opportunities. Circumventing HR departments and connecting the job seeker directly with the business owner often works best, especially in smaller companies with little formal HR function. I have had a couple experiences. We have a local grocer in our state that has been wonderful to work with and has created some customized positions for one or two students in different parts of the state in our School to Work project. And it's, you know, there's always those exceptions, but primarily, right, we try to avoid going places that have big HR systems. But I really found this grocer to be wonderful to work with. Another piece to think about in terms of rethinking traditional methods is that employers are always hiring. They're hiring people with similar interests, values, and especially those who can generate profits. Skills and ability to learn new skills are critical to job creation. One of the other pieces that I loved learning and spending when I spend time with Carrie and other folks is just the number of small businesses compared to large businesses in this country. And I'm sure the numbers are changing, and I'm sure that, you know, that's always a changing thing, but there are far more small businesses in this country that employ less than 20 employees. I think it was 33 million businesses with fewer than 20 employees, only about 40,000 businesses with more than 500. So when we're all kind of going to these bigger places, there's so many more that have smaller, there's so many more small businesses that we can go to. And they're not all looking for places, but if there are resources or looking for people, but there are resources and negotiations, there are just more opportunities than we know. I think the other piece to really think about is quality employment is built on the match between personal contribution and the needs of the workplace. It has to be mutually beneficial. Overemphasizing selling misses the point of customized employment. I've seen really great job developers and spent time with people who are really great at building really good relationships with employers. But it doesn't always mean that it's the right fit for a person who has some pretty specific ideal conditions of employment, and has been really specific about those themes and places that make sense for them. It is not, as sales approaches often sometimes suggest, a matter of convincing employers to hire. It really is making sense. So, customized job development is based on knowledge of the job seeker from discovery. That knowledge of the business is built from the informational interviews, observing others on the job, scheduling follow-up visits, completing job analysis records, determining how you could improve efficiencies, increase revenues, preparing, planning, and negotiating. You really have to understand what the unmet business needs might be, what technology or resources might be needed, where is the industry going? I've talked to businesses who say they know what a job developer is, they know, right, salespeople that want to tell them things, and it's pretty insulting if you go in and you don't know anything about their business, if you've not researched at all. But in my experience, people are always happy to tell you about what they do, why they do it, and give you advice. So really spending time listening and not selling, I think, is pretty key. So that kind of gets us back to the informational interviews that we talked about early on in this presentation. So the initial informational interviews you're doing in stage 2 of the discovery process. And you're basing those informational interviews on what you learned about the job seeker, where their skills and talents and interests are going. So it's really important to connect it, to make sure you're connecting what you're learning about the person and using those informational interviews when you're to the job development phase. That if it's going well, you're asking for the opportunity to come back, trying it out, getting your hands dirty. Remember, you're a consultant and a problem solver. So seeing yourself as a way to help the business, and also obviously for the job seeker. But again, you have to understand the business. You have to research and spend time knowing what it is they might need. You have to gain some understanding before offering solutions. So understanding about negotiation. Negotiation begins when the job developer sees ways in which the job seeker can contribute to the business in ways that are valuable to the business. I've certainly spent time in places and had a job seeker in mind, and I've thought, boy, that is, I have a dear friend of mine that is very into organizing and things need to be a certain place. And I've gone to a little market and things have been very disorganized. And I've thought about her and how great she would be able to come in and just sort things out. And I'm sure we've all been in those kinds of experiences where you think about somebody and how they could contribute to a workplace. A business owner might negotiate job duties if it saves them money, if it helps them make money, if it creates efficiency, if it increases the customer base or improves customer relations. Interest-based negotiation really requires advanced preparation, right? Discovery, informational interviews, job analysis, really highlighting what matters to the business owner, looking at their profit, solving problems. This is, again, where you're really listening, not talking, and building trust. Now I want to talk about the role of job development and staying true to the customized process and how you have accountability to your funders. Primarily, that's vocational rehabilitation. So working from the list of 20 is required, right? You spend all of this time developing those lists of 20 and identifying where it makes sense for this person to potentially work in places where their skills and talents could potentially be used. You need to be writing and providing reports monthly or however often that's required that reflect that customized job development is happening with each business and what that looks like, what kind of analysis you're doing, summarizing what's happening in your informational interviews, Voc Rehab counselors are paying for customized job development. It needs to look different. When they make the referral for customized employment services, it's expected it's a higher level of service. So it's really important to build in the routine of developing those lists of 20, reporting on how you're working and how that looks different. We want to have accountability not only to the job seeker, to the family, to funders, managers and supervisors, to the quality of your work. These are some questions that we in Utah that we came up with based on the WinTAC guidance that came out with the 9 essential elements of customized employment. So like I've mentioned, in Utah, we've had several demonstration projects around customized employment. And so our Voc Rehab came up with these, we came up with these questions to really, for VR counselors to be able to answer and know and have a better idea about a placement being customized. So did the employment specialist negotiate the job duties performed by the client? Did the employment specialist negotiate at the level needed? So either in the job seeker's behalf or for the job seeker for their work schedule or business needs as identified in the staging record and vocational profile? Did they negotiate performance expectations? Does the job setting reflect their ideal work conditions, interacting, or, you know, what are those things that you identified in the staging record? Is the setting or the work being performed mutually beneficial to both the business and the client? Is the place of employment connected to at least one of the 3 vocational themes identified in the staging record of vocational profile? I think those are pretty powerful to say how this is different than customized job development is different than traditional job development. As many VR counselors in states, right, everybody's still kind of learning this process and not everybody's an expert. So creating some parameters and guidelines holds everybody accountable. So to summarize, I just wanted to provide just some key points. That the purpose of discovery is to figure out where someone is at their best and have opportunities to learn and grow in their career, right? Discovery is always connected to employment, whether that's self-employment or wage employment. The purpose of discovery is to help somebody find employment. It's always important to really go back and revisit key pieces of information in the process and the staging record to keep the focus on the job seeker's vocational themes. Refining that, what did you miss? What maybe do you need to do differently? Especially when you're new. I think it's hard sometimes when you're learning a process to always get every piece right or glean some of the valuable information out. Customized employment is a collective process. You have to engage others. You have to ask questions. You have to work with others and make that a priority in terms of how you spend your time. You have to refine the list of 20. You have to dig deeper than just doing a Google search. Employment planning meetings are essential, not only to hold yourself accountable, but to keep that person's team engaged and the person knowing that you're working in their behalf. Thank you so much. Again, this project is funded by a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research on customized employment of individuals with disabilities.